Hello and welcome to this edition of the Potomac Local Podcast. I'm your host, Uriah Kiser. I'm the publisher of Potomac Local News, and joining me today is Simone Reddington from the Until They Kick Us Out podcast in Manassas, the wonderful city that we've covered for so many years. Simone, thanks for coming on with us today.
Oh, thanks for having me.
So you have obviously you have a podcast. You talk about what's happening in Manassas. If those who have not listened to your podcast yet, I do recommend it. It's so cool to
It's
hear
fun.
people talk about where we live. So many times you flip on the radio and you hear what's going on in DC or Maryland or what have you, but then you have this podcast and talks exactly it talks about what you're doing, where you go, where we live, and what's happening in our hometown. You do that, and so where can people find your podcast?
They can find us on YouTube on the Wild Style Network. They can find us on Facebook. There's all you have to do is just type in Until They Kick Us Out. You can even ask Alexa and she'll play it for you. So you can watch it or listen to it. But it's definitely a good time. Guaranteed.
And I've been listening. You and your host, Nikki France, cover so much ground on your show that I wanted to do with the city. And one of the things that we've been writing a lot about here at Potomac Local is obviously the election that's coming up. We have, we have the mayor seat is up. We have 3 seats on the city council, I believe, that are up. We have 3 additional seats on the school board.
4.
Thank you. 4 seats on the school board that are up. So people are talking about the state of the city and where we find ourselves. And I'll let you be the first to say, what is the state of our city?
I would be ignorant if I didn't acknowledge that there hasn't been a lot of improvement over our city over the past 3 years. Like there are several things, the festivals, there's been a lot of construction going on, whether or not I'm a fan of it, but I mean, there are things happening within this town. And I love it. And I'm seeing it go in a direction where I don't believe that it's being led in a healthy way. I never paid attention to politics before. I'd go out and vote, and I'm a Republican, so I tend to vote in that, but I never really paid attention. And I started talking to so many of my friends that are business owners. We've lived here now. We moved in 2006. And in talking to business owners, I realized the challenges that they were up against, that no one is really advocating for them, that our local government is very disconnected from what's going on right down the street from City Hall. I've been disenchanted with the land purchases left and right, understaffing within the local government. And once I started learning about all of this and piecing it together, I thought, wow, I hope somebody stands up and says something. I didn't think it was going to be me.
So let's talk about some of those things, those land purchases. We've seen the city over the course of the past 10 years. They've bought land, they've sold land. They are very much in the real
estate game.
Really, really, truly are.
Yeah.
We've seen that, but it's the stuff that they buy that kind of gets the headlines. Right.
Yeah.
That's what gets people talking. So let's talk about what they've bought. They've bought the Manassas Shopping Center, where years ago that was home to a Safeway store years ago, and then it was a bunch of small shops. They came in, they raised that shopping center on Grant Avenue, which years ago, and I'm talking about going back when I was a kid, growing up in Woodbridge, and the only reason why we came to Manassas was because it has a Sears store, because we had everything else. I mean, Manassas had a Sears and Montgomery Ward, right? Woodbridge didn't, so that's why we came up to Manassas. Back in the day when they were 2 very separate places. Not that there was anything wrong with Manassas or Woodbridge. It's just you had pretty much all the same stuff in both towns, except for that Sears and Montgomery Ward at the Manassas Mall. So anyway, that Grant Avenue was the main entrance, and used to go in under the railroad track and cut up through Old Town. But I digress. They purchased that. It's a police station now. Going forward, we've seen other purchases. Most recently, the Marsteller Middle School place that's going
right
to be
on
a
Sudley
community
Road.
center. Yeah, it's going to be a fire station. They bought the Mathis Avenue Shopping Center. They've got a grand plan, I guess, to put some
Do they?
housing over there.
Do they have a
That's what
grand
they.
plan?
Well, that's what they have a wish list. I
Yes.
maybe they more
Well, the one
more or
that
less.
upsets me the most is the Oldtown Inn that they purchased here in right in the heart of Oldtown Manassas.
Yeah.
I mean, that's even more frustrating because it's not even fully demolished. We've been staring at fencing and concrete slabs and broken bricks and all sorts of things for a year now, almost a year, and no plan
So,
for it.
yeah, well, again, they keep stringing us along and saying that we have a plan, and they keep holding these things called community conversations.
Hmm.
And this is where they hold things, public meetings downtown. They invite whoever's paying attention to the Facebook group and sees this thing happening, or maybe in their email they get a notification. Um, and they say, well, what do you want? And then people will say this, I want this amenity or that amenity, and they take it all in. And then they go away for years at a time, it seems. And you never hear back from what anybody wants. And from my sources, as I talk to people, it's going to be a hotel. That's generally what they want.
I would love that.
But when you look at how many hotels there are, not only just in Manassas, I mean, we've seen the True by Hilton Hotel over by the
Airport. Yeah.
one near the airport. There's another one that's being built there. We just reported on. I think it's a Home Two Suites, if I'm not mistaken, that's going to be built there. So
Two Silos, I believe, is also going to be putting in a hotel.
They're right across right across there into the county.
So in that area, there's going to be plenty of lodging.
So you look at all these places, and very few of these projects have a lot of government intervention, local government intervention, where the government comes in and they buy the property and they tear down the motel and then turn around and say, okay, we bought the property for you. We tore down the motel so you can build a hotel. That doesn't really happen.
If anybody wants to chip in.
Right. That we don't see that too many other places.
No, and it's very alarming. I mean, I've spoken with government officials, and I will say this: the Marsteller acquisition, I'm kind of behind that. I mean, that gives us, I think it's 26 acres. Like, it's a tremendous amount of green space. That's what these other purchases do not include. And I very much like the thought of an idea of a rec center. Right now, all of our residents are going to the Freedom Center or Manassas Park. We as a city do not have a dedicated rec center, and I think that would be great. And emergency services, I think that's a very smart, and I do think that they more have a plan locked down for that particular piece of property. Oldtown Inn, that is just a hot mess, and I really wish, if anything, if you're not going to give us an answer, go in there and at least level it, turn it into green space, or just pave the whole darn thing and make it a parking lot. It's such an eyesore to anybody that's coming in via the Route 28 corridor into Manassas. But the Mathis Avenue project, again, I was at an event, a lunch with the mayor event that she would hold at Manassas Museum every Friday in August. And it came up that we don't even have any kind of housing administration or some kind of official in that capacity to give us advice to say, hey, this is the best use of this property, a mix of retail, a mix of residential. I mean, we don't even have anybody giving us that information. We're just out there signing, paperwork to buy. And I think that's very, very irresponsible.
We've seen different properties being snapped up, not only by the city, but also say in Prince William County too, where there's a property in Woodbridge right off Caton Hill Road, right near I-95. And back in December, they were talking about, we're going to buy this property and we're going to build an indoor sports and rec facility similar to the Freedom Center. And this is going to cater to travel teams that come from all over the East Coast, and they'll come play their sports, and then after they'll go out in the restaurants and they'll eat.
That's
and
a
then they'll
huge
shop, and
industry.
then
That is a
it'll
huge money driver. I did it for years with my daughter, travel volleyball. That's smart.
So then it comes time to make the vote, and the Board of County Supervisors decides that we don't think the sports thing is ready quite yet. So what we're going to do is we're going to push pause on that, but we're going to buy the property because, well, they're just not making any more land. They're just
They
not
did an
making any
old
more of it.
switcheroony.
So they buy the property, and the government becomes the property owner. And there are a lot of people out there that say, listen, that's not what government really does, especially local government, going around buying up property that could be purchased by a business who will turn around and do something with it in one of the most populated areas in the United States. I'm sure, right along an interstate
right
highway.
along 95. I mean, that's amazing.
Yeah. So there's a lot of people who say that in the county and Manassas. You know, you have spent so much time talking on your podcast about the business owners in downtown Manassas, and you call it Old Town, and I love this because I was trained by Patrick Small when he came in and says, nope, it's no longer Old Town, it's downtown. That's what we're going to brand it. And that's about a 10-year-old thing. And so you call it Old Town, and I'll call it downtown, and then maybe we'll trip each other up along the way. But you know these businesses. I know you go to First Fridays. I know you see and you go to support these businesses. Can you tell us how is business for them? I mean, the economy is not the best that it has been. People are cutting back. They're eating out less. They're shopping. They're less. They're looking for the best bang for their buck. And at the end of the day, you know, these small town shop owners, these mom and pop businesses that do so much for the community, they're suffering.
I mean, I can tell you, yes, they pull in big numbers and they pull in money on First Friday, but that's one day. I mean, I can go in on First Friday and not be able to get a drink anywhere. And then you go on a Sunday and it's, you know, there's 4 people sitting in there in the afternoon. I mean, there's just not, I think that the Old Town specific, and I'm speaking on behalf of the businesses here in Old Town because this is where I reside. I'm only steps away from churches and post office and banks. I'm right here in the thick of things. And I think that these business owners are, I think they're suffering from the lack of leadership within our government to kind of come in and connect everybody. You know, we have designated director of HMI, Kristen, you know, she is part of this team, and you have the police chief, and he is part of this team. And I think that there's just not enough invested by our local government as well. You know, you have the givens, you have HMI, police chief, but I don't feel like there's actually somebody within our government taking a look at the jewel that they have within Manassas and saying, hey, what can I do to help your business better? What is wrong with, you know, where is the disconnect? Because what I'm seeing is scheduling over here in one department for festivals that are actively working against businesses in town. You know, they're pulling all of the business to whatever private event it is, you know, Thai festivals. We have several different multicultural events. And I'm not saying all of them are bad. I'm just saying we need to logistically look at how these festivals are positioned and when they're scheduled and how it affects our businesses, because the businesses are what keep this place together, what keep this town together.
If you throw something on the lawn at Manassas Museum, and it's a very nice lawn, you draw people there, and yet if you put food trucks there as well, in addition to the live band that you might have and vendors there, that doesn't really entice me to want to walk across the railroad tracks.
No, and then if you're someone else that is coming down to conduct business in Old Town, there's nowhere to park. Because all those, you know, 1,000 or so people, however many people are on the lawn, are taking up all the parking spaces. So, so it's all like a trickle down, and I think that the businesses aren't supported enough. I don't think they're recognized enough. If I could go around screaming their names from the rooftops every day, I would, because they're all such amazing people. And the stories behind so many of the different owners here in town. And I talked about it on our last episode. How many people started as a dishwasher? How many people started as a line cook? How many people started hauling out the trash can? And now they own a business here. It's incredible. And nobody recognizes that.
Years ago, back in a different life, when Chris Sellers was working behind the bar at
City Tavern,
I was slinging hash right along, in the restaurant, doing that years ago. But do you? So you talk about these business owners. Do you feel like they lack a voice in terms of maybe representation over at
100%.
City Hall? Because I will go around and I'll talk to a lot of these business owners. I love to do that. It's just to see what's happening in the city.
They're awesome people.
And you ask them, how are things going? And you get the similar response. The sun's shining, everything's wonderful, everybody's so great.
They can't.
And then I imagine when I walk out the door, it's like, yeah, and if I can only, I just get the sense that I'm not getting the
Nobody can say anything in this town. Nobody can say. I can't even tell you the amount of feedback that I've gotten after our, particularly our more political episodes. The feedback that I get from city employees, residents, business owners. Oh my God, thank you for saying what we're all thinking. Thank you, and somehow, some way I've become this voice, not on my own. I don't know what has happened, but if it's what I can do to help my friends out and to help these businesses out, then so be it. I'll do it. I'm willing to. I don't have that same risk on the line that they do owning a business. I know that some people own a business and dared to put out signs for our current mayor's opponent. And I mean, they faced difficulties. They had things said to them in the past. It's just disgusting. We live in a town of toxic positivity. It's awful.
And let's talk about that, because I you've been critical of the mayor, and I wrote a rare. I wrote a rare.
Oh, she hates you.
And in 14 years, I have written less than 10 op-eds, and given the response and the number of likes or whatever I had on that post, I may rethink that, because it actually, people read it, and I think they, at least they read it. That's all I know. But the mayor, she announced her campaign for mayor in 2019, and we knew her from being on the council.
Mm-hmm.
And before that, I knew her as a business owner. She used to come to 1 Million Cups at the centrifuge, and to talk about her business. So she has been in the community for a long time. I started asking for an interview in 2019 when she announced that she was going to run. And to this day, she has never granted an interview to this news organization. And again, we didn't pop up yesterday. We've been around 14 years. We've covered many a meeting, late nights. I heard you the other day on your show saying, I would never want to do this. I'd have to, leave early and promise to be back and then come back. And yeah, I mean, it's a time commitment. And so, yes, thank you to all the people who sit up there in those elected
It's amazing
positions.
what these families and what these individuals sacrifice for service to their town.
And we've covered that. We've been there, and to try to help the people understand. And yet, despite all that, has never really wanted to talk to us. And that seems to be the modus operandi, not only in Manassas, but in many of the local jurisdictions that we cover. Remember, I cover from Manassas to Fredericksburg.
Yeah. Wow.
And a lot of the jurisdictions are, let's just not, let's not respond. Let's, maybe he'll go away.
Everything's happy. Yeah.
Pretend and talk about only the positive stuff. And I like what you said, toxic positivity. That's a great way to put it, because what we get. That's what we get from the city councils. That's what we get from the school boards. Everything's wonderful. And then the SOL scores come out from Manassas City.
And they're not wonderful.
They're right. They're regressing back to where they were in COVID. They're regressing.
And so to sit there and say that everything's hunky dory and to say that you can't give yourself a grade on the current school systems. Now, yes, or schooling. The school board is separate from the mayor. I understand, but we are just this town is suffering because no one feels free enough to speak up about the things that need fixing. And the school board and schools being one of the most glaring issues.
I can't tell you exactly. First of all, I don't know if the school board in Manassas City has always been elected. I know in Prince William County, around about 1995 is when they started electing their school board members. Prior to that, they were appointed by the magisterial district supervisors. So the Brentsville district supervisor on the Prince William County Board of Supervisors would appoint their school board member, and they would kind of work in concert with each other.
That's interesting.
And so, given the fact now that all we hear from the in Manassas from the city council, especially the sitting council members, is the school board's completely separate. All we do is give them money. That's all we do. We can't really, as you said, give them a. When asked at that forum that we had on October 1st, could you grade it? And she said, no, I couldn't do that. We're constantly reminded of this firewall. And when I've asked these incumbents who are on the city council, if because they give them money, they give the majority of the school division's budget to them, in addition to federal and state funding, would you set up and consider benchmarks for improvements? If you improved by this much or this percentage, we may give a little more or do this or something like that. And all of them are universally opposed to it. So I wonder, is it
So are they separate?
Are
they like, how much do they work together? I mean,
right, exactly. I mean, should they be elected? Should the school board be elected? Should they be appointed? I mean, should we get a city council that really, in fact, works with the school board as much as this current city council claims they do to make to make the schools as great as this current city council claims they are?
I mean, I don't know what the answer truly would be. I can just tell you that what we have on our current school board is not working. There's not even a vote. You know what they're going to vote. They're going to vote along their party lines. They're not taking into consideration these children, the kids that are in the school. All they can sit there and say is, yes, we're improving. We failed to reach accreditation three years in a row. We failed accreditation. Like, how is that we're doing okay? How is that we're doing fine? How is that not, wow, we're really screwing things up? We need to sit back and see what decisions we're making. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me.
Osborne High School and I believe it's Metz are both working off of some provisional accreditation that dates back to the pandemic era, where everybody was sent home fleeing for the hills, running and learning on computers. And we saw by the SOL scores how well that turned out. So, but that's a whole separate conversation.
But we're doing great. We're doing great.
I know, yes, and
doing so great.
Toxic positivity. It's interesting. I think you've coined a new phrase here. I like that.
All right. Yeah, cool. It's the only way I can think about it in my brain. Because I mean, positively, when you think of something being positive, it's happy, and it makes you happy, and it's sunshine. But when it's forced down your throat and it's fake, and it's a lie, and it's something hiding something else, then it's toxic, and it does no one any good. And the more you do it, the more harmful it is. We've been dealing with it now for years. It's toxic.
Going back to the mayor here, her job is to set the agenda
Mhm.
for these city council meetings, the one we talked about that can go on for hours and hours and hours, and the ones that you obviously don't want to attend all of them.
No way, no
Uh,
way.
and, and then during the meeting to run that meeting to make sure that it runs smoothly and that the business is conducted in a timely fashion, and to recognize the members of the council who have an opinion on something and want to speak, or maybe a citizen that's come to give some feedback and public comment time. And that's it. She doesn't vote, right? Or the mayor, male or woman, man or woman doesn't vote.
No.
They're a tiebreaker. And so if the council's deadlocked on a particular issue, the mayor can cast a vote and break the tie. And that's the way it's set up. So unlike a big city such like, New York City or Los Angeles, and I think in Virginia, I think we may only have, I think Richmond maybe in Virginia is the only example, or one of the few, of a strong mayor who, like, when you turn on a TV show and you hear the mayor running things, that's not how it works in Manassas. Really in Manassas, the council runs things. And Mayor Davis Younger had the opportunity in 2021 to become more of a strong mayor and to get a vote on council. That would have required
that was a thing, huh? That's interesting.
So they had a discussion about cracking open the charter of the city. And because Virginia is a Dillon rule state, everything that a locality does has to be approved by the General Assembly. Richmond has a heavy hand over those types of things. So the city would have had to have sent a copy of its charter down for review by some committee or subcommittee of the General Assembly. And then eventually that committee, if they decided to review it, could pretty much crack it open and change anything they wanted to. I mean, they could do anything they want because they are the all-knowing, all-seeing Virginia General Assembly, right? And so they ultimately decided not to do that because under Governor Youngkin, they were concerned that, and the Republicans had control of the House at that time, that sending the Manassas Charter, which from a city that has been voting Democratic since 2016, 2017, and going further blue, that may not be a good idea. So in the end, she voted to not
go down
and not get a vote, and ultimately not have a vote. So I think it's important that the people know that when they're voting on mayor, they're voting on a person who tie breaks and who just kind of smiles and kind of says,
I called her a professional event attender because that's really what they do. They cut ribbons, they pose for pictures. Like I said, or like you said, they have, clerical mayoral duties to that they have to do within city council and in the chambers. But other than that, it looks pretty fun. You're going around doing all this fun stuff. My problem with our mayor is I think she does a great job at that. She's at everything. She's, she even repeated my words and called herself a professional event attender. My problem is she has fostered this culture within our government that we can't get all of the proper people in place. So we're not functioning as a proper government. We have a man who is like our superhero, Doug Keene, who's straddling chief of police and city manager and has been doing that for now almost a year. Like we can't get these people in place because nobody wants to work with our mayor. She has a bad attitude. If you don't agree with her policies, you don't exist. Simple as that. And city employees have learned to not speak up. I don't know what we do about that other than replace our mayor. City council, I have issues, and I've spoken openly about my issues with Mark Wolf continuously getting reelected. And I'm trying to bring some things to light that have been buried over the years so people can make an informed decision. Yes, Michelle Davis Younger is not voting, so she is not making decisions with my tax money or on my behalf, but city council is, and they all work together. And I just don't trust it. I don't trust decisions that are made. I don't trust the, talking behind the scenes. I just don't trust where the money's going and who is ultimately behind making these decisions.
And whether it has been an appointment, such as a temporary appointment to the council that we've seen when somebody leaves, and in fact, when she was elected mayor, they had to make a temporary appointment to her old seat so someone could come in and finish that out. So we've seen, and all of those appointments that we've seen have been along party lines. Have been very
Yeah.
partisan. We've seen her involvement at the White House, going to the Biden events, and then her taking credit for bringing Joe Biden and Kamala Harris to the Hilton Performing Arts Center to make what essentially was Joe Biden's campaign kickoff back in January of this year. So we've seen a lot of involvement in that, political alignment for Democrats. Whereas that's not what we used to see, especially under the former leadership years ago. This was for streetlight issues. This had to do with issues that were facing the town and the city, and that's really all we ever heard about.
Yeah.
So it's cool to have the president of the United States come to your town, and that's a big deal. But we've also seen other partisan moves of this entire council under her leadership over the course of the past 4 years. Every time I talk to the governor, I ask him, do you really think the Republicans have a shot this year in 24? And every single time he says, yes, Virginia is in play. And so we have to take that and wonder what to do with that, because, Republican presidential candidate hasn't won in Virginia since 2004. So it's been 20 years. And, it was kind of frankly, it was a shocker when he won governor in 2021.
Mm-hmm.
So given that you have your finger on the pulse of the community, and you know a lot of people, you talk with a lot of people, and given the fact that Northern Virginia is solid blue, Manassas has been voting for Democrats for years, I'm going to ask you that same question. Do the Republicans have a shot in Manassas in 2024?
It's funny that you say that, or that you ask that, because in this moment, because right now I feel really good. I do. I feel really good about things. I feel like we're moving in the right direction. I feel like by me presenting information, and I hope other people come out and say things, like, we cannot sit back and stay quiet. If we want to change things, we have to speak up. If you were to ask me this a couple of weeks ago, I would have said no. But we're starting something, and I can feel it. I can feel the energy. I can feel the people latching on, just based on feedback from our podcast episodes. They're overwhelmingly Tang. I mean, people are just exploding for this. Most people didn't even realize who the mayor was. They just realized things were going to crap. So this has been very eye-opening, and it's kind of exciting. I mean, you go to one of the meetings and people are cheering, and it's just, I mean, it's an electric energy that feels really good. And if you're sitting there thinking of, who you're going to be voting for, find out more information, do your research. Don't just vote on party lines. I'm noticing all these signs in our neighborhood, and I'm seeing people with Harris Waltz signs next to a Tang sign, next to the Republican school board candidates, next to the Republicans. I mean, it's amazing. I'm even seeing so many signs that they have the Democratic school board candidates and the Democratic city council candidates, but not the mayors. So I'm noticing it in little signs here and there, and I really think it's taking off. And we still have a couple more weeks to go to push. So I'm feeling good.
And I want to be clear for anybody who's listening, who's hearing Tang and saying, well, that's a good drink. No, Tang is
it's a good
Cheyenne.
drink.
It is a great drink, but but she is also the Tang is Cheyenne Tang Byam, Cheyenne Tang Byam, who is running for as the opponent to Michelle Davis Younger, who has been the mayor for years. And she is a business owner who has, I mean, personally, in all transparency, she's my tailor. I go there.
Mine too.
So she's a lot of people's tailors. She's been there for years. She's a business owner. She's been in the Rotary. She's plugged in to so many social causes within the city. I can't walk out of there without being handed a flyer and told where to donate and told where where Rotary's having their party next weekend. You need to come.
Yeah.
And support a great cause. I mean, she gives wheelchairs over. They take them overseas and give them to deserving people who need them.
You know what stands out about her to me? When COVID hit in 2020 and the world was in a panic and we didn't know what we were doing and we didn't know how to proceed with life, Tang was the one. She stood up and started making the masks. I mean, she had masks. She was passing them out to the first responders. She was taking them across the street to the hospital. I mean, I can remember calling and crying, begging for one for my parents because my father is on oxygen. He's a paraplegic, and I was just a nervous wreck. And she said, come into the shop. And I came in, I said, let me pay. She said, just make a donation. And here she is cranking out these masks. I mean, she was the first person in our town to step up and be like, okay, here's one solution. I mean, it was incredible to watch. It was quite amazing. This little.
And we wrote that story. I remember that. I forgot it until you brought it up. But yeah, we wrote the story about her making
to the rescue.
Yeah, absolutely. So your podcast, it's not, I wouldn't call it a political podcast. You do talk about local politics as it pertains to the city of Manassas. But I wouldn't, you're certainly not talking about, Washington Insider, Beltway stuff. I mean, that's not what you guys do. Yeah. Which is why I find it so refreshing, because there's so much of that other stuff out there.
You can't escape it.
Right. But you don't get enough of what, the people who really affect your day-to-day lives, and whether or not your trash pickup's coming or your kids are going to have a bus to get to school. I mean, these are
it's actually interesting
that affect us more so than whatever they do in Washington this week. So is it your goal to become a local politics podcast? Where do you see this going?
So, and I have to talk about Nikki for a minute, my co-host, because I absolutely love her. We weren't super close. And then kind of as a joke, she said, let's start a podcast. My husband's like, you should. And I've never laughed harder with anybody else than Nikki France. I mean, we just have the best time. And when she said, let's start a podcast, and we were kind of trying to figure out what we were going to talk about and doing outlines, there was like a dash of politics here and there. But I personally, not Nikki, have been kind of stewing with all of these emotions and opinions and, issues that I had with the city. And Nikki even says it in episode 5.5, I went to her and I was like, if I can't talk about these things now that I have this platform, I'm going to regret it forever. And so she said, absolutely, let's do. And so we did, as a joke, kind of did the half episode, and it took off. And then before I knew it, information's coming at me left and right. And people, I've become this voice, and I'm very, very proud of that. I'm proud that people trust me to come to me with their stories, with their information. And I'm glad that I can put out not just the political stuff, but I can teach people about this village that we live amongst. I mean, the people that are here that aren't politicians they're so incredible. And so I love talking about that. The politics kind of happened by accident, has taken off. So we're gonna keep riding this wave since we're in election season. I do have goals. Like, I think that once the election is over, I'd like to start a full-on campaign to find a city manager. I think no better people to sell Manassas than Simone and Nikki. So yeah, I think that there are jobs for us in the future in that realm, but we like to live in the fun, talking about neighbors and people and trash pickups.
Yeah. Well, I want to get you on the record. I know that you have addressed this on your podcast, but as
Mhm.
far as we're concerned here, generally when people come in and they start making a name for themselves on a local level, whether it be through a podcast, what you're doing, or through an Instagram page or what have you, start building a following. The next step is, well, when are you going to apply to become city manager, or when are you going to start your campaign for mayor?
Oh, I've heard
Right?
that. I've been hearing that, and hearing that left and right. And I can tell everyone right now, I will never, ever, ever. I I have been happily retired for 20 years, just raising my children and taking care of my home and my lovely husband and my animals. I mean, this is what I love, to be able to dabble in politics at from a distance like I am. That's a lot of fun. Sign me up. I'm here for it all day. But to actually go and work, no.
Doing this is more fun.
This
Trust
is
me,
more
it
fun.
is.
This is a lot more rewarding.
It is. It truly is. It's not only fun, but it's rewarding, as you said, and it kind of puts you in touch with a lot of different areas that you may have not, been. I mean, one of the things I love about being a local reporter is that one day I could be in the courthouse talking with the prosecutor and defense attorney about a case, and the next day I'm out cleaning, a roadside with the group that's working to beautify the community, picking
Yeah.
up trash.
Yeah.
So being in this forum, in local media, it's a blessing, and I really wish you all the success and all of the best for your podcast, you and Nikki France, what you're doing with it, until they kick us out on the Wild Style Network. It is a must listen for anyone who lives in or around Manassas.
Yeah. I mean, I really think a lot of people can just replace Manassas with the name of their own town. I mean, so many people are dealing with issues on different levels all over the country.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. Simone Reddington
Thank
is
you.
the co-host of the Until They Kick Us Out podcast. We appreciate you coming on and sharing some insight
Of
on
course.
Manassas. We hope
Thank
to do
you
it
so much
again.
for having me.